Hello, and welcome to Valory's AI Frontier series, where we talk with people exploring the far edges of artificial intelligence. As the premier creator of open source frameworks for co-owned AI, Valory's mission is to enable communities, organizations, and even countries to co-own the AI systems of the future. We've been dedicated to AI agent-based technologies since our launch in 2021, with a special focus on decentralized autonomous agents. We believe the future of artificial general intelligence is likely agentic. Given the surge of interest in AI agents, we felt that it was important to collect and share a broad range of perspectives from people working in the space. In this series, you'll hear ideas and experiences directly from these pioneers. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with João Moura. As a developer, João has been experimenting with AI agents for some time. He shared his insights into working with AI and talked about his personal AI agent project, CrewAI. We also covered the unique power of multi-agent systems and why open source development is crucial for the future of AI. So let's get started. Here's my conversation with João Moura. João, thank you for joining me today. Maybe you could introduce yourself and let us know who you are and what you've been working on.
Sure, 100%. Well, thank you for having me, actually. Great to be talking with you. My name's kind of hard to pronounce for any no Portuguese speaker, but I go by João. I'm currently a director of AI engineering at ClearBit. Have been working there for 5 years. We have built a bunch of stuff with AI that has been super interesting. In the last 1 year, we have been diving pretty deep into LLMs, into agents, into embeddings, and all things that are kind of like ruling the world of tech. And more recently, I got very interested in the AI agents. Have been working on that. They're helping me on my day-to-day. And also came up with a framework to build AI agents that is now open source. So I guess, yeah, that's kind of a little bit of everything that is going on right now.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. We're definitely big on open source in particular, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you, because in the tweet where you came across my feed, I'm pretty sure that you mentioned specifically you were working with open sourcing the models and tools you're using, and that really got my attention. You mentioned that AI agents are already helping you. How's that working out? What are you using them for?
So that's so cool. So this is my framework nowadays to whatever I should build an agent or to have an idea for, like, is there an agent that I want to build? I'm basically looking for things that I want to do, or at least I want the outcome, the result of doing it, but I either find no motivation to do, no time, or just doesn't feel worth it, right? Even though it might be. So in this case, a great one that I have going on is actually helping me run my LinkedIn. I always want to make my LinkedIn like better and kind of like be posting content there. I post content in Twitter a lot. I try to do blog posts, but LinkedIn was always like lacking a little bit. So I built a group of agents that kind of help me make sure that I can get ideas that I have that are still not well formed and turn them into great posts. And then I can edit, I can find images, and I can put them together and share them. And it has been a blast. I went from not posting anything on Twitter to posting at least 2 times a week and having a bunch of time to spare. Like, not really have to do much there other than revise a little bit, make sure that everything looks good before I publish.
Yeah, I think the vision is definitely time saving as the thing that gets a lot of people in the door. Maybe we could take a step back though and define our terms. How do you define an AI agent? What makes it agentic versus just an artificial intelligence?
Well, I think there's 2 steps to answer that question, in my opinion. First, the main difference between regular AI and agents is that agents are somewhat autonomous, right? They can operate themselves. When you have like this AI, if you think about AI before LLMs, like everything was about like predicting and classification, regression. That was the AI word for like the most part of it. Then with LLMs, we start to bring chat as an interface. This is still prediction anyway, but now there's like this chat interface. I can think about agents as like another interface for AIs and the same algos that are running behind it. But now it's like it's interacting with itself. It has autonomy to use tools to perform actions and to give you a final outcome by itself autonomously. So I think that's the main difference about like AI in isolation and how you would run it, or LLMs through chats, how most of people have been using it, and an AI agent itself. That said, I think there's a two-step like answer to this, because the other thing is like, all right, if AI agents are just automating and doing things autonomously, what is the difference between an AI agent and a regular automation that you would have that you write in code, just calling APIs and ifs and else's and all that? And I think the main difference between there is because AI agents give you the ability to automate decision making, and that's not something that you can necessarily do with heuristics, at least not at scale.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Maybe we can find a way to illustrate it with some more specificity by giving me an example of something that you would consider an AI agent and then something that isn't an AI agent.
So, for example, one thing that I saw a bunch of people get quote unquote wrong, or at least that was not performing great when AI agents were kind of like starting to pop up with baby AGI and all that, is that people want to build a single AI agent that can do it all, right? So you have like this AI agent and you give it a bunch of tools and you just say like, hey, create a website for me. And then you expect it to learn how to code, write an API, to download something, and that this didn't work. I think that if you try to use AI agents to mimic user behavior, like to its core, exactly like a human would behave, you're missing the point on AI agents. It's like if you had an airplane that flaps its wings. Like that is not optimal, right? You saw that in nature, and then you try to mimic. But what I think people need to remember is that at the end of the day, AI agents are software. So you shouldn't be like flapping wings. You should make them still and put jets on it. So where I want to get to that is that, for example, you don't necessarily want your AI agent to kind of like figure out if you should search a documentation to write an API to call this API. You actually want to code the API call and provide it as a tool so that it can only like worry and thinking about taking a decision on should I use this tool or not to perform the task that you're assigning to me. So I think that would be like somewhat the difference there.
This thinking step where we're pausing and reflecting and then making autonomous choices with the tools that we have.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's where LLMs excel, right? Like that's what they do the best. Like that's what they're trying to automate that, like producing that content, taking decisions, like, taking into account whatever context you're providing them. So I think like you should leave that to the AI agent and code whatever else you need.
Maybe we can learn a little about your background. How did you get into working with AI specifically?
Mm. Well, I always had interest in AI in general. I tried a few things here and there, but never really like got my head around it up to 2017. And 2017, I decided to do kind of like a specialization in data science and ML in general. And it was great. It was eye-opening. I already knew like some Python historically. Up to that point, I was doing mainly Ruby, but I knew some Python. And that's when I learned like pandas, NumPy, scikit-learn. That's what I try my first like regression, classification, and ensemble models. And like it was so much eye-opening. And then I started to apply it to all the different jobs and businesses that I had since then. So yeah, that's basically how I got into it. Started building like regular regression and classification models in the businesses that I was working with. And then eventually, when I got to Clearbit, I joined Clearbit initially as an engineering manager. And the cool thing about Clearbit is just that they have like this huge pool of data. And when I joined, it was like, we need to do something about it. We need to start like using AI in some way, somehow. The data is here. So that has been a very interesting journey from like you're starting to consider the AI options all the way to now what I consider us to be like a very much a AI native company, I guess.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I think in the future, we'll have many more companies like that because of people who early on, well, maybe we're still early, but it sometimes doesn't feel like it. But this is the moment where people advocating for the use of these tools, in my opinion, is going to really fundamentally shape the types of companies that survive.
I gotta say, it has been a wild journey. The ability to use LLMs to do all sorts of things, from parsing data to generating data to extracting data. Like there's so much thing that you can do. All things data related. And embeddings was another thing that we also used a lot. And I think you're right. Like going back to where you started, all those things kind of like seem to be slowly converging into tools for AI agents to unlock different use cases, because those are great use separately and everyone should be using them. They have like amazing like use cases. But once they start to put all that together, it becomes pretty clear that it's something special if you do it in the right way.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have a moment that stands out in your mind where it kind of clicked for you, or you thought, okay, something amazing is happening here?
Honestly, I think my first rag system kind of like blew me away a little bit. Where like I plugged in the embeddings and connected with an LLM, and I was able to chat with those docs. I mean, nowadays there's a ton of apps that do that, but you go back like 8 months, that was not the case.
Yeah.
And when they did that for the first time, I was like, all right, there's something here. And then just keeping expanding, like what else can we do with embeddings and LLMs? That has been very good. And then more recently, the second moment that I saw that was basically with this AI agent for like LinkedIn. I was thinking about, hey, I want to give a try to AI agents, what I want to automate it. And I did this LinkedIn thing. It's basically, I think, 4 or 5 agents that they work together. I gave it a run for the first time. And I was like, I don't know what is going to come out of this. And boom, the article was there and I liked it. Of course, it was not ready. I had to like change 3 paragraphs here and make it shorter and like make sure that it like was something that I agreed with. And it was done. And it was great. This would have taken me hours to do like the same research on the topic that I wanted and get all the information that I needed and put this together. So I'm very bullish on AI agents nowadays because of that experience. And I think there's so many more other opportunities out there.
So was this personal project what brought you to AI agents?
Yes, that was the project that got me started with AI agents. And then because when I did that, I was looking into like what people are using to do AI agents, right? So there was like AutoGem, there was Camel, and there was ChatDAV. The thing that made me want to do AI agent in the first place was ChatDAV. When I saw like AutoGem, I was like, all right, AutoGem is great, but honestly, I don't like the DSL. It's not that great. And also, I think like they're very constrained on their idea of how agents should work together. So I was not very excited about that. But then I look at ChatDAV and I was blown away. Like this group of agents were building games and like they were working and writing documentation. So I spent some time like, all right, can I use this in an app? And the answer for that for me back then was no, because that is like you clone the repository and you have like to change all the settings and it's supposed to run like a simulation. So it's not like a class that you would have on your code that would do something. So I was like, all right, this is not the way, but I love it. So I basically started to bring in the components of the role playing aspects that you see on CheckDAV. That I think it's probably where the magic is, where you have like an agent that has a backstory, that has a goal, and they understands like what he needs to do. So I grabbed that, and I grabbed some of the ideas of like, all right, agents need to work together in different processes, like humans. Sometimes they're gonna work collectively, sometimes they're gonna work separately, and sometimes they're gonna handwork to each other. And I decided to incorporate all that into a framework. Um, and then I'm using now this framework to build other agents. So
Oh, right
let's
on.
let's have some fun with it.
Yeah. What made you decide that having them work separately and then collaborate might get you better results? Like
Yeah.
AI agents are more and more familiar for people now because they've seen examples of ChatGPT thinking, for example, and that's quite compelling. But multi-agent systems can do things that single agents can't. How do you use multi-agent systems to achieve outcomes that a single agent can't? Or how do you get better results through using a multi-agent system?
That's a great question, and I'm gonna say out of the bat that multi-agent systems is the way. Right? And one agent is great, but it's like you want to have a jack of all trades to do like everything great, and that's just not the case. Not the case in real life. It's not be the case for an LLM as well. The other thing is that LLMs have context windows. Even if you go for some of the newer models that have huge context windows, if you give it like a long series of tasks that it's going to need to perform in order to get to an outcome, it's going to get lost in the way, right? There's a very much short memory there. So there's a lot of drawbacks if you decide to get one single agent to try to perform something. If it's a simple task, then yeah, you might be able to do it, but you're missing out on a lot of like the great use cases. Where the things really shine is when you use multi-agents, because like humans, you can get specialized agents to do each aspect of what you need. And that's where I'm having a lot of like great results with. So for example, even if you look at like the way that you interact with ChatGPT, like whenever you ask it to write something for you, and or a code or something, and then you don't like it, and then you ask it to write it back or change something, and that makes it better. That interaction produced a better outcome. So if you remove yourself from the equation and get another LLM there, the two are working now. The two are like revising each other's work. That will also produce a better outcome. A lot of people are kind of tapping into that now with reinforced learning by AI feedback as well. Some of the open source models that are coming out of are using like similar techniques where you have like a model evaluate each other to produce synthetic content and all that. But for AI agents, I think multi-agents are the way to go, especially, and this has been my experience, the best performing agents, especially if you're doing role-playing agents working in groups, and then your agent has a clear like direction, goal, and role. And yeah, that's what I have been running with, and that's the framework that I build is all around this, and has been working like a charm.
So when you're designing these systems, what elements have you found make a positive impact on the effectiveness?
I think a lot go back to the task that you wanted to perform.
Right.
So I think that like if you dissect whatever your prompt might be, and your prompt will have a bunch of stuff in there like tools and whatever, the actual task, the actual question is where you're gonna tune a lot of things. The other thing is making sure that your tools return well formatted text. So whatever your agent use, so let's say that you want like to scrap a web page and summarize it. Like you need to return a well formatted text. That was another thing that I also saw that had a huge improvement. And honestly, the role play thing, that was the by far like the thing that made the biggest difference. For example, if I want an agent to write a piece of content, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do one agent that is a researcher. This researcher is an expert on AI related things, and it knows all about it, knows all about startups. And this agent's gonna only focus on doing this research, and he has a goal to be the best researcher in the world. He has a goal on helping its customers and all that. And then I have another agent that I'm going to say, you are a principal content writer. You're amazing at your job and yada, yada, yada. So I think like really, really diving into like giving them backstories and roles and goals kind of help it to kind of like shovel them in the way a little bit. All that goes to say though that it works great with GPT-4. Once that you start using open source models, it still works, but it probably requires some like parameter tuning on the model itself, like stop words and temperature and top P and all that. Even open source models now are also an option, and they work pretty well.
So you mentioned this idea of roles. Do you think the reason that the roles improve your effectiveness is because they limit what each agent does, and so they don't burn time on tasks that won't provide you with a good output? What is your opinion on why the role restriction seems to improve the efficacy?
Yeah, I think like the role thing is something that even if you're using the chat GPT, you still see good results with it. I
Yeah,
think what it
definitely.
does is, I don't think it limits, I think it guides, right? It
Hmm.
guides the following up questions, it guides the following up behavior and how it should respond. Technically underneath, I don't know how that play a role on selecting like what the next token will be and predicting what the next token should be. But the thing that it makes the most difference for me is not that it hallucinates less or anything like that, even though it might. It's more about like how I want you to behave, how I want you to write.
Hmm.
Um, and it also helps when you give like depending on the tools that you're giving this agent, the role and the two combination kind of like helps the agent to decide like how it's going to perform it, right? So for example, if I create a, a director of content creation, so director of content creation or a chief content creator, and I say, hey, you have the ability to delegate work, and your task now is to evaluate the final article that we are writing and making sure that it's good, that it uses like the right wording and all that, yada, yada, yada. So now, because of the role, this agent will feel more entitled to like, all right, I can delegate. I should be using this, like, because I understand that a chief content creator will delegate things. So I think it's just another way for you to kind of like keep steering this agent to make sure that it uses the right tools, and do the right work, and get where you want to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you're totally right. Even when you're in the one input from the human, one agent, ChatGPT, you do often see better results. And on that note, I'm interested in your multi-agent systems. How do you have the agents sharing information? How are they communicating with each other? And how often does that happen?
All right, so yes, I think that the way that this agents collab is basically around like what process they abide to. So if you look about humans, for example, how humans behave, you have like, let's say that you run a company, you have all those different employees, and the outcome that they're going to produce, like how good it will be, depends not only on the people themselves, but also on the process that they're going to use to work together to collaborate. So you can have people going to a meeting and talking together and come up with an answer. You can have people do their work in isolation and pass like feedback from each other. There's a bunch of different ways that these people could work. And I think this is very similar to agents. And I think that's also where some of the magic about the multi-agents frameworks thing work. So let's say that you have a task, for example, writing an article. Writing an article feels very much something that should be a sequential line of work. Someone's going to do the research. Then from that research, someone's going to write 3 ideas as a draft. Someone's going to pick the best idea. Then a senior content writer is going to write the draft. Then it's going to be a review process. So it's a sequential line of work, and you have one single outcome at the end. But then you have other kind of interactions, like for example, building a landing page. You're going to have someone that's going to produce content, someone that's going to choose a template, and then someone's going to update this template. And that doesn't feel like necessarily it's a sequential line of work. It could be in parallel, it could work together. So I think there's a lot to explore still on not only creating the agents and creating the tasks, but then defining by what process those agents will work together to accomplish the results for those tasks. And that's something that I'm now starting to explore, like getting out of that sequential process execution to explore other different types of agents and iterations. So to your answer, I think how often they're going to change information is going to depend on the process that you're going to be abiding to. They can now be in the chat room. They can operate separately, depending on how they go. Different ways will take shape.
Right. In your example of the article, I was imagining that it's an iterative process where you're actually creating 3 documents. And so the output of the first agent's task is the research, and the output there is notes as text, which is the input to the next task. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of different ways to manage that. And the desired outcome has a lot to do with how you would set that up. It leads on well into another question that I have for you, which is about self-improving AIs and this idea of like self-healing. What are you seeing happening with self-improvement? How far along do you think that we are to a truly self-improving AI?
I think there's different ways that we can accomplish that, at least that I have seen out there. One of the ways is, I think most of them, at the end of the day, is going to go back into memory, right? That's the thing that I want to fix. You want to make sure that whatever agent is running, it has memory from what happened and can assess that memory. You already see that in some of the open source code out there. For example, LangChain, it gives the ability for you to attach memory to an agent. And what happens there behind the scenes is that basically on every iteration, on every prompt, as this agent is trying to get to the desired result, it's gonna summarize how the conversation is going so far, and it's gonna store like that into the next prompts, so it can always refer that. So it becomes kind of like a running summary of all the interactions up to the point that it gets the expected outcome, and it tries to keep that summary short enough while still capturing all the information about it. And there are other kinds of memory that I have seen people work with as well. I think LangChain also offers one that is called entities. So on every prompt, it's going to try to extract what are the entities that are present in this prompt. So for example, let's say your prompt mentioned that you have a friend named Thomas and that this person likes ice cream. It's going to extract that, and it's going to add that to all the prompts moving forward. Thomas likes ice cream. So that's another way to kind of get around that a little bit. But to the point that where you're saying where days have gone by and you're and you run the LLM now, and when you run it again, you want to do it better. I think we're starting to see that with what people are calling longer memory, specifically MemGPT. That's the big one that I have been seeing around. And it's a very good paper. It talks about this idea of how memory for LLM should be similar to memory in computers, where you have a long-term memory that's like a hard drive, and you have a short-term memory that is a RAM. And then the paper goes on and describing how the memory fluctuates from one to the other, and what ways the LLM decides to access that memory or not. I'm actually very interested on that, especially for long-term running agents, right? Where expanding on the LinkedIn idea, for example, is less about hey, create me a post, but more about hey, check all my metrics throughout this year, see how well this is performing, and course correct as we go. And then it keeps all that memory of all the metrics and everything. So I think long-term memory is going to be the way that we are going to crack this. And it's going to probably be a mix of inner reg systems or something.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm not totally sure since I'm not working so hands-on with them, but I'm very interested in seeing a best practice shakeout, but it's still very early. I have a few more questions for you. Another one is agents specifically. Have you seen anyone else create a truly autonomous agent? And if not, what elements do you think are missing?
I have not. The thing that I've seen lately that kind of surprised me on that front was I forgot what is the name of the project, but it's a project that uses GPT Vision to run your computer for you. So it basically takes a screenshot from your computer, and given a task, it knows how to use your computer. It opens a browser, opens a calculator, opens numbers, and type it out and do it for you. And I think that's an interesting concept. But I haven't seen a fully autonomous agent, not yet. And honestly, I wonder if you do that, is that AGI? I guess that's the final goal, fully autonomous agent. I think there's a bunch of things that we are missing to get there. And honestly, even though that is very interesting, I think there's so much that we can do with specific agents right now that I think everyone should be focusing more on that, if anything. That would be my hot take on it, I guess. That AGI would be great, yes. And I mean, I'm eager to see it happen. And if that takes the form of autonomous agents that can do anything for you, that would be amazing. But I think with the agents that we have, we can do so much already that I think we have a lot of use cases to apply it to.
Yeah, for sure. There's already an absolutely incredible amount that can be done, and especially using this agentic approach. It often gives you much better results. When they're working in collaboration, you can start to add in things like consensus and trust and revision. And what do you think the next big capability unlock is going to be, both for AI in general and then agents specifically?
Honestly, the thing that I'm super excited about is that is the fact that we are kind of like running out of data a little bit. Like there's so much data that you can there's only so much data you can get our hands on to train an LLM nowadays. And now we are getting like this new like very big LLMs like 72 billion parameters or even more. We're gonna run out of data. And I think that's gonna be a hinge on how well we're gonna be able to scale LLMs. So I wonder how we are gonna suppress that plateau. I think it's either gonna be keep training LLMs, but now with synthetic data that other LLMs generate, or we're going to need to figure out a way out of transformers and use some other new tech to kind of invent what will be the next stage of AI. So I'm very excited to see how different people in the market, different experts, and different companies are going to try different angles at this. If they're going to try to do like machines that can self-learn and that they can learn from itself by playing with different versions of themselves, or if they are going to just generate like data and use that as training data, or if someone's going to kind of like develop something that's completely different from transformers, and that's going to be another breakthrough.
All right, so it could be many different things, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to even imagine what could be coming next, which is why my next question is a little funny sometimes. Do you have any near-term predictions?
Near-term predictions, yes. I think Gemini from Google will be great. I think it's going to use synthetic data. It's going to use reinforced learning from AI feedback. And I also think that Q-Star is going to be similar to that. And GPT, we're going to release it sometime soon. So that'll be my prediction, that we're going to start to see like this synthetic data and reinforced learning by AI feedback more often than not.
All right, maybe only a few months we'll be able to find out how that prediction did. I did want to talk about maybe have you advocate for open source, explain why it matters to you, why you think you need it as developer with your own projects and your own goals, and then the broader case for open source. Why in this space in particular is it so important that we have open source AI models and open source AI tools and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, there's so many layers to this question. Like, so many layers. Open source is great. I think open source was a huge unfair advantage for me and my career personally. And I think it's also a huge unfair advantage for the businesses that play it right. So I think it's something that everyone should be watching for, either for their personal gain, either for their business gains. And also comes with a sense of community that is inspiring and that you don't see in many other professions. And that's basically how programming runs nowadays, on top of open source code. So personally, open source, as I said, has been fundamental. I did a lot of open source back in when I was doing Ruby, go back to 2012, 2014. That opened up doors for me, like going to conferences. I spoke in a bunch of big conferences about those open source projects. I got job offers due to those like open source projects. So I would say personally for developers is the ability for you to learn fast and to work with the best people out there, right? Like you could be working with like whoever you believe is a reference in the programming language that you like, by just contributing to an open source code where this person is involved. And you're going to have feedback from them with your PRs, and you're going to be able to learn from that. So I think it's a huge learning opportunity, and it opens doors. The other aspect of it is it also helps democratize a little bit of technology in general and get other people to access things that they wouldn't be able otherwise. For AI specifically, I think this is fundamental because this is such an amazing tool. We're talking about something that will drastically change humanity, and it already is. Like if you look at the way that we are performing our jobs, that is changing drastically. Of course, that everyone is just coming back from Thanksgiving, and probably when sitting down with their families, they heard like how no one was talking about GPT, right? Your aunt was not talking about GPT. I don't know, maybe she is, but we're getting there. Things are moving very fast, and this is going to drastically change. I think what people don't get is that this public version is like V3, V4. So this is only the beginning. And if we let like only a few companies have the power to run these things, that doesn't necessarily contribute to the overall success and to the overall understanding of how this company, how these models should be used, right? It's better for business. You get locked in one vendor, and once that you're locked in, there's a bunch of problems. There's uptime. There's like changes that they might do, things that they might deprecate. And also, I think it hinders some of the things that you could do because running open source models and code allow you to do some things faster. So yeah, I think that's overall my take. I think I have more to say on that, but I think that I wrap this. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I do like that you point out by contributing, it's not just that the end result is a good tool for you to use, but by getting involved in the community, it advances your ability to use the tool in the first place because of your exposure. Whereas if you're just calling OpenAI's APIs, you might be able to go get support from them, but you're not working directly with it and just getting feedback on your PRs. You can learn something and also get a good result at the same time. That is a unique value prop that only open source offers. So my last question is, do you have any recommendations that you might make for reading, videos, useful maybe courses you've taken for people who want to go a little bit deeper on this stuff?
A lot of what I have been learning is experimentation. So that's what I would advise people to do. I know not everyone learns the same way. Some people like learn better taking classes or whatnot. My case, I learned by like trial and error. I learned about experimenting things. And a trend that I notice, especially on X nowadays, is that like for every 100 people that are talking about LLMs, there's probably 25 people that are actually doing something with it, and then there's like 5 people that actually have something in production. So I would say strive to be one of those 5 people, right? Sometimes I know that it might be draining to think like, oh, I'm going to need to set up a computer. I need to figure out how to run this. But I guarantee that if you just get it started, like spend 5 minutes on it, you might get hooked up and you're going to spending a few more hours on it and you're going to have a good experience. So I would say try things out, like try the APIs, call those APIs, try a tutorial. I know it can be a little bit overwhelming, like at first, but it's definitely worth it. And experimentation is what makes people better, I think so.
Yeah, and this also might be a unique moment that hasn't come along in quite a while where there's only 5 people. You could be one of them. This is a very unique opportunity that people could be taking advantage of. So I like your answer quite a bit. So last, where can people keep up with you? Where can people follow you?
Yeah, sure. I'm mostly on X. So if you wanna chat, go to X. I'll give you my handle so that you can put in the description.
For sure.
So there's that. Also, I built this multi-agent role-playing framework, and Python is a very thin framework if you want to give it a try. It's called CrewAI, and you can find it in GitHub. It's also linked in my X profile, so you can find it there. And I guess that's basically it. And also LinkedIn. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and add me on LinkedIn, I won't mind.
Right on. Well, thank you so much, João. This was a very illuminating conversation, and I'm glad we got to have it. I think people will really get a lot out of hearing your perspective, and I hope that they do follow your advice and go out there and do some experimentation on their own.
It was great talking to you. Thank you for having me again, Thomas.